The first thing I heard was my own scream echoing off marble walls. Someone was dragging me from my office, my heels scraping against the polished floor, my arm burning where fingers dug into my skin like iron clamps. I did not understand what was happening, only that every eye in the Kangji Hotels and Resort lobby was on me. Guests froze mid-conversation, bellhops stopped pushing luggage carts. The concierge desk I had worked behind for 3 years became smaller and smaller as I was pulled away from everything I had built. Then I heard his voice, calm, deep, dangerous in a quiet way that made the air itself seem to still. She's mine. Those two words cut through the chaos like a blade forged in ice, and in that moment, my life split into before and after. If you're new here, please subscribe and turn on notifications. And these stories only live because you share them. Now let's continue. Just an hour earlier, I had been invisible. I was standing behind the mahogany concierge desk at Kangji Hotels and Resort, the flagship property of Seoul's most prestigious hospitality group. My fingers moved across the keyboard with the kind of focus that comes from years of surviving by keeping your head down. Reservation confirmations, VIP arrival alerts, special requests that ranged from reasonable to impossible. I handled them all with a smile that never quite reached my eyes. The lobby buzzed around me like a living organism. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across Italian marble floors. Fresh orchids perfumed the air from massive arrangements that cost more than my monthly salary. Guests in designer clothes floated past, with their wealth so casual it was almost invisible to them. I had learned early that service was my safest language. My grandmother used to say that when words failed, kindness spoke the truth. I believed her. Every interaction I had carried pieces of her teachings, the small coastal town in America where I grew up. The nights when money was tight, but guests at the bed and breakfast she ran were still treated like family. Park Chul-soo stalked the lobby like he owned not just the space but the people in it. As general manager of Kangji Hotels, his Italian suit stayed spotless while the rest of us wore our exhaustion like stains. Whenever his eyes landed on me, I felt it, dislike mixed with something sharper. I had earned my position as senior concierge with skill, not favors, and he hated that. He hated even more that I was American. That I was black. That despite every obstacle he had placed in my path, I had risen anyway. Kangji Hotels and Resort was not just a place to sleep. It was where deals were made quietly, where powerful people pretended they were just enjoying luxury. The presidential suite had hosted prime ministers. The private dining rooms had seen mergers that reshuffled entire industries. Money and influence filled the air thicker than the scent of expensive cologne and imported flowers. At 8:17 p.m., my desk phone rang. Concierge, this is Sophie Taylor speaking. How may I assist you? Presidential suite. The voice was deep, unhurried. I need something arranged, something that requires discretion and creativity. I straightened in my chair, and the presidential suite was currently occupied by a guest whose name I had been specifically instructed not to speak aloud. A guest whose arrival had tripled our security presence and made even Chul-soo walk on eggshells. Of course, sir. What do you require? My mother's death anniversary is tomorrow. I want to honor her memory with an experience she would have loved. She grew up poor in Busan, never traveled, never saw the ocean from anywhere but the docks where she worked. He paused, and I heard something vulnerable beneath the controlled voice. Create something that would have made her feel seen, something real, no luxury for its own sake, luxury with meaning. I closed my eyes for a moment and breathed. This was not a standard request. This was a test of everything I believed about hospitality. I understand, sir. May I have until tomorrow morning to present options? You may. But Sophie Taylor? The way he said my name made me realize he had researched me before calling. I chose you specifically because I was told you understand what it means to make someone feel like they belong. Do not disappoint me. The call ended. I sat frozen for a moment, my heart pounding. Then I began to work. Chul Su appeared at my desk 20 minutes later, his cologne arriving before he did. He leaned close enough that I could see the cruelty gleaming in his eyes. "I heard you took a call from the presidential suite," he said softly. "That guest specifically requested the senior concierge. Imagine my surprise when I learned he meant you." "I was simply doing my job, sir." "Your job is whatever I say it is." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "That guest is the most important person to stay at this hotel in 5 years. If you embarrass us, if you embarrass me, I will personally ensure you never work in hospitality again. Not in Seoul. Not in Korea. Not anywhere." I kept my expression neutral, but my hands trembled slightly beneath the desk. "I understand, sir." "Good." He straightened his tie. "Now get back to work. And remember, you're only here because I allow it." He walked away, leaving the faint scent of his cologne and the heavy weight of his threat behind. I worked through the night. Not at the hotel, I couldn't think there, couldn't breathe with Chul Su's shadow hanging over everything. Instead, I went home to my tiny apartment in a neighborhood most expats avoided, brewed tea that reminded me of my grandmother, and let my mind wander. A mother who grew up poor in Busan, who never traveled, who saw the ocean only from docks where she worked. What would have made her feel seen? I thought about my own grandmother, who had worked her entire life serving others and rarely been served herself. I thought about the first time I had taken her to a real restaurant, not expensive, just thoughtful, and watched her cry because someone had pulled out her chair for her. Luxury with meaning. By 3 a.m., I had a plan. The next morning, I arrived at the hotel before dawn. I made calls, called in favors, negotiated with vendors who owed me from years of sending business their way. By the time the sun rose over Seoul, everything was in place. At 9 a.m., I called the presidential suite. "Sir, I have prepared 3 options for you. May I present them?" "Come up." I had never been inside the presidential suite. Most employees hadn't. It was reserved for guests whose privacy was absolute. I rode the private elevator with my hands clasped to keep them from shaking, a leather portfolio tucked under my arm. The doors opened into a space that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Seoul's skyline like a living painting. The furniture was minimal but exquisite. Each piece probably cost more than my car. And standing by the window, his back to me, was a man whose silhouette radiated power even in stillness. He turned. Lim Jin-seok was not what I expected. The photos I had seen, grainy surveillance-style images that circulated among hotel staff like forbidden currency, hadn't captured the intensity of his presence. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp features that might have been carved from stone. His hair was dark and perfectly styled. His eyes, when they found mine, were the color of black coffee and just as bitter. But there was something else there too. Something tired. Something human. "Miss Taylor." He gestured to a chair. "Sit." I sat, opening my portfolio with hands that had finally stopped trembling. "I have prepared 3 options, sir, each designed to honor your mother's memory in a different way." I walked him through them. The first was traditional, a memorial dinner featuring dishes from Busan, served in a private room decorated with photographs and flowers. The second was experiential, a day trip to the coastal town where his mother had worked, with arrangements for him to visit the docks and place flowers where she had stood. The third was the one that had kept me awake until 3 a.m. "The third option," I said carefully, "is not about looking backward. It's about completing something your mother never could." Jin-seok's expression flickered. "Explain." "You mentioned she never traveled, never saw the ocean from anywhere but those docks." I pulled out a small booklet I had designed myself, printed at a 24-hour shop on my way to work. "This is a scholarship fund in her name. It would send young women from Busan, women like your mother was, on educational travel experiences they could never afford themselves. The first recipient would travel tomorrow, on the anniversary of your mother's death. She would see the ocean from a boat for the first time. She would write a letter to your mother, thanking her for making it possible. I held my breath. Jin-seok was silent for a long moment. He took the booklet from my hands and paged through it slowly. I watched his jaw tighten, watched something shift behind his eyes. "You created this last night," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." "Why?" I thought about lying, about giving him a professional answer about exceeding guest expectations, but something in his gaze demanded honesty. "Because my grandmother worked her whole life serving others and no one ever served her back," I said quietly. "She died before I could change that." I thought, maybe I could help you do something she couldn't. The silence stretched between us. Then Jin-seok set the booklet down and looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Option 3, he said. "All of it. Fund the scholarship properly. Not just one recipient, but 10. Every year. In perpetuity." "Sir, that would cost—" "I know what it costs." His voice softened slightly. "Make it happen, Miss Taylor. And thank you." I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. "You may go," he said, turning back to the window. "But Sophie—" I paused at the door. "I will remember this. These stories don't tell themselves. If you're feeling this journey, hit that subscribe button. Your support keeps these voices alive. Let's keep going." I did not understand what those words meant until 2 hours later, when my world collapsed. The morning had been a blur of arrangements. Phone calls to lawyers about establishing the scholarship. Coordination with travel agencies for the first recipient. 1,000 details that required 1,000 small decisions, each one carrying the weight of Jin-seok's trust. I was at my desk, confirming the final details when Chul-soo appeared. He was not alone. Behind him stood 2 men I recognized as hotel security, and behind them, a woman from Human Resources whose face was carefully blank. "Sophie Taylor," Chul-soo announced, his voice loud enough to carry across the lobby. "You are hereby terminated for gross misconduct and theft." The words didn't make sense. They bounced off my ears like a foreign language. "I'm sorry. What?" "Don't play innocent." Chul-soo's smile was triumphant. "We have evidence that you have been embezzling from guest accounts, skimming payments, redirecting funds to your personal accounts. That's impossible. I've never—" "The evidence is clear." He nodded to the security guards. "Escort her out, and make sure she doesn't take anything that doesn't belong to her." Before I could respond, hands closed around my arms. I was lifted from my chair, my feet barely touching the ground as they dragged me toward the door. "This is a mistake," I screamed. "I haven't stolen anything. Check the records, check everything. I'm innocent." But no one was listening. The guests in the lobby stared with a mixture of horror and fascination. My colleagues at the front desk looked away, unwilling to meet my eyes. Even the bellhops I had joked with for years suddenly found their shoes fascinating. I was being dragged through the lobby of the hotel I had given 3 years of my life to, accused of crimes I hadn't committed, and no one was going to help me. My heels scraped against the marble. My arm burned where the security guard's fingers dug into my skin. I heard myself screaming, but the sound seemed to come from very far away. Then, "Stop." The word was quiet, but it carried like thunder. The security guards froze. Chul-soo's triumphant expression flickered. The entire lobby went silent. I looked up to see Lim Jin-seok walking toward us from the elevator bank. He moved unhurried, his Italian shoes clicking against the marble with measured precision. His face was a mask of controlled fury, not the hot anger of a man who had lost his temper, but the cold rage of someone who was about to destroy everything in his path. "Release her," he said. The security guards looked at Chul-soo, uncertain. "This is a hotel matter," Chul-soo said, his voice slightly less confident than before. "This woman has stolen—" "She has stolen nothing." Jin Seok stopped directly in front of Chul Soo, close enough that the general manager had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. What she has done is provide exceptional service to a guest who happens to own significant shares in this hotel's parent company. What you have done is fabricate charges against an employee who refused to be intimidated by your petty tyranny. Chul Soo's face went pale. Sir, I don't know what she told you, but she told me nothing. She didn't have to. Jin Seok's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, but somehow it carried to every corner of the lobby. I had your accounts audited this morning, Mr. Park. The real embezzlement is quite clear, and it leads directly to your office. The silence was absolute. You have 1 hour to resign and leave this building, Jin Seok continued. If you are still here after that, I will have you arrested. And I will ensure that every hotel in Asia knows exactly why. Chul Soo's mouth opened and closed. For a moment I thought he might argue. Then his shoulders slumped, and without another word, he turned and walked toward the elevators. The security guards released my arms. I stumbled slightly, catching myself on a nearby pillar. Jin Seok turned to face the lobby, his voice carrying clearly. Miss Taylor is innocent of all charges. She remains employed by this hotel at my personal request. Anyone who has questions about this may direct them to my office. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and something in his expression softened. Come, he said. We need to talk. I followed him to the elevators on shaking legs, leaving behind the stunned lobby and the shattered remains of the life I thought I knew. And the presidential suite was quieter now, the morning light replaced by the golden glow of afternoon sun. Jin Seok gestured to the same chair I had sat in hours earlier, but this time, he sat across from me instead of standing by the window. You're shaking, he observed. Yes. There was no point in pretending otherwise. Would you like tea? I almost laughed. The most powerful man in the building was offering to make me tea. Please. He rose and moved to a small tea station I hadn't noticed before. His movements were precise, almost meditative, heating water to the correct temperature, measuring leaves, arranging cups on a tray. It was strangely domestic for a man who had just destroyed a career with a few quiet words. My mother taught me this, he said, not looking at me. She believed that tea should be prepared with attention. That anything worth doing was worth doing with care. He brought the tray to the table between us and poured. The tea was green, fragrant, perfect. Thank you, I said, wrapping my hands around the warm cup, for the tea, and for everything else. I did not do it for thanks. He sipped his own tea, watching me over the rim. I did it because it was right. How did you know? About Chul Soo? About the embezzlement? I know many things, Miss Taylor. It is my business to know. He set down his cup. When you presented your ideas this morning, I made some inquiries. I learned about your background, your grandmother's bed and breakfast, your hospitality degree earned while working 2 jobs, your 3 years at this hotel, during which you have received exactly 0 promotions despite exceptional performance reviews. He leaned forward slightly. I also learned that Park Chul-soo has systematically blocked every advancement opportunity for you, that he has taken credit for your ideas, that he has created a hostile environment specifically designed to drive you out. I didn't realize it was that obvious. It wasn't. To most people. His eyes met mine. But I am not most people. I took a sip of tea, buying time to think. Why does any of this matter to you? I'm just a concierge. You are not just anything. His voice sharpened slightly. You are someone who, in a single night, created something more meaningful than most people manage in a lifetime. You saw my pain and you answered it with creativity and compassion. That is rare. He stood abruptly, moving to the window. The Seoul skyline stretched behind him, a forest of glass and steel. I have spent my life surrounded by people who want things from me, he said quietly. Money, power, access. They see only what I can give them. They do not see me. He turned to face me. This morning, you did not try to impress me with luxury. You tried to understand me. You tried to help me honor someone I loved. He paused. That is why I intervened. That is why you are here now. What happens now? The question came out smaller than I intended. That depends on you. He returned to his chair, his posture relaxing slightly. I have resources, connections, influence. I can help you rebuild what was destroyed today, not just your job, but your career. And I can open doors that would otherwise remain closed. And what would you want in return? It was a dangerous question, but I had to ask. In my experience, powerful men did not offer help without expecting something. Jin-seok studied me for a long moment. Honesty, he said finally. I want someone in my orbit who tells me the truth, not what they think I want to hear. Someone with the creativity to see solutions I might miss. Someone whose loyalty, if earned, would be genuine. You're offering me a job. I am offering you a choice. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a business card, simple and elegant. This is my private line. Take time to think. Recover from what happened today. And when you are ready, call me. I took the card. The paper was thick, expensive. The text was embossed in silver. And if I decide not to call? Then I wish you well, and I will ensure that no rumor of today's accusations follows you. He smiled slightly. But I think you will call, because you are not someone who runs from opportunity, Miss Taylor. You are someone who runs toward it. He stood, signaling that our conversation was over. Take the rest of the day. The hotel will provide a car to take you home. Your belongings will be delivered. He paused at the door. And Sophie, do not let fear make your decision for you. You have too much potential for that. Then he was gone, and I was alone with a cup of cooling tea and a business card that felt like it held the weight of my entire future. I did not sleep that night either. The hotel had been efficient, too efficient, in erasing my presence. By the time I reached my apartment, my desk had already been cleared, my personal items packed into boxes that arrived an hour later. 3 years of my life, reduced to 2 cardboard boxes and a stack of memories I wasn't sure I wanted to keep. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at Jin-seok's card. Who was he really? I knew the basics. Heir to the Lim Group, a conglomerate that had fingers in shipping, real estate, entertainment. Wealthy beyond imagination. Powerful in ways that extended far beyond business. But there were darker whispers, too. The Lim family had connections that stretched back generations, connections that blurred the line between legitimate business and something else entirely. The kind of connections that made police look the other way, the kind that made enemies disappear. Was I really considering going to work for a man like that? My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. Sophie, baby, sometimes the Lord sends help in packages we don't expect. Don't be so proud that you turn down a blessing just because it doesn't look the way you imagined. I picked up my phone and dialed before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the first ring. Miss Taylor, I expected your call. You were that confident? I was that hopeful. There was warmth in his voice that surprised me. Have you made a decision? Not entirely. I have questions first. I would expect nothing less. Meet me tomorrow. Breakfast, 8 a.m. I will send an address. The call ended. I stared at the phone in my hand, wondering if I had just made the best decision of my life or the worst. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, please smash that subscribe button. Every new subscriber helps bring more stories like this to life. Now, let's continue. The address he sent was not what I expected. I had imagined a high-end restaurant, a private club, somewhere dripping with the kind of wealth and privilege that would remind me of my place. Instead, the coordinates led me to a small noodle shop in Yongno, tucked between a pharmacy and a dry cleaner. The kind of place that had been there for decades, surviving gentrification through sheer stubbornness. Jin Seok was already seated when I arrived, occupying a corner booth that faced the door. He was dressed differently today: dark jeans, a simple gray sweater, no visible signs of the wealth that had filled his presidential suite. He could have been any businessman grabbing breakfast before work. Except for the two men seated at the counter, their suits slightly too well fitted, their eyes slightly too watchful. Security, I realized. Even here, even now, he was never truly alone. "You found it," he said as I slid into the booth across from him. It wasn't hard, though I admit I expected somewhere more extravagant. He smiled slightly. "This was my mother's favorite restaurant. She brought me here as a child, back when my father was still building the company and money was not so plentiful. The owner's grandmother served us herself." He gestured to the elderly woman behind the counter, who was already preparing something without being asked. "She still remembers my mother's order." The woman approached with two steaming bowls of kalguksu, knife-cut noodle soup, simple and perfect. The broth was clear, fragrant with clam and anchovy. The noodles were thick and chewy. "My mother's order," Jin Seok said. She believed that how a person ate noodles told you everything about their character. Loud slurping meant enthusiasm. Small bites meant caution. Leaving broth in the bowl meant wastefulness. "And what does it mean if you cry into your soup?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Jin Seok's expression shifted. "It means you are human. My mother cried into this soup often, usually when she was happy." We ate in silence for a few minutes. The soup was extraordinary. Comfort in liquid form, warmth spreading through my chest with each spoonful. "You said you had questions," Jin Seok said eventually. I set down my spoon. "Who are you, really? Not the business version. Not the hotel version. Who is Lim Jin Seok when the doors are closed?" He considered the question with more seriousness than I expected. "I am many things. A businessman, as you know. A son, though my mother is gone and my father and I have not spoken in years. A brother to a sister who lives in London and sends me pictures of her children I have never met." He paused. "I am also the heir to a legacy that carries weight. Some of that weight is visible, some is not. The whispers I've heard are probably true." His honesty surprised me. The Lim family did not build its empire through kindness alone. There are parts of my history, parts of my present, that exist in shadows. I will not pretend otherwise. "And you expect me to step into those shadows with you?" "No." His eyes met mine. "I expect you to bring light. That is precisely why I need you." I leaned back, processing. "Explain." "My business interests have expanded significantly in recent years. Hotels, restaurants, entertainment venues, legitimate enterprises that require management by people I can trust. People who understand service. People who can see problems before they become crises." He set down his own spoon. "I have lieutenants who handle the darker aspects of my world. What I lack is someone who can handle the visible ones, someone who can represent the Lim Group to the public with grace and integrity." "You want me to be your... what? Your face?" "I want you to be my partner." The word hung in the air between us. Not in the romantic sense, not unless that develops naturally over time, but in the business sense. I want your creativity, your honesty, your ability to see people clearly. In return, I will provide resources, protection, and opportunity. Protection from what? From the enemies that come with proximity to power. His voice hardened slightly. "There are people who would use you to hurt me, Sophie. If you accept this offer, you will be entering a world where kindness is sometimes mistaken for weakness. I will do everything in my power to shield you, but I cannot guarantee your safety completely. You need to understand that." The elderly woman refilled our tea without being asked, her hands steady despite her age. Jin Seok thanked her in Korean, and she patted his shoulder with the familiarity of someone who had watched him grow up. "Why me?" I asked when she had gone. You could have anyone. People with more experience, more connections, more everything. I could, he agreed. But I don't want them. I want you. He leaned forward. When I tasted my mother's favorite soup last week, I felt nothing. When I stayed in the presidential suite, surrounded by more luxury than she could have imagined, I felt nothing. But when you presented your idea, when you created something that would honor her memory by helping others, I felt everything. His voice dropped. You made me feel something real, Sophie. In a world full of people who only see my wealth, you saw my grief. You saw my loneliness. You saw me. He paused. That is why I want you. Because you see. I stared at him across the table, this powerful man who had saved me from humiliation and was now offering me the world. The soup cooled between us. The elderly woman hummed behind the counter. Outside, Sol bustled on, you indifferent to the moment happening in this tiny shop. I need time, I said finally, to think, to understand what I'm agreeing to. Take what you need. He pulled out a small folder and slid it across the table. These are the basic terms: housing, salary, responsibilities. Review them, ask questions, and when you are ready, call me. I took the folder without opening it. And if I say no, then I will respect your decision and ensure you find a position worthy of your talents elsewhere. He stood, leaving bills on the table that would cover our meal many times over. But Sophie, I hope you say yes. Not for my sake, but for yours. You have been surviving for so long, it is time to start thriving. He walked toward the door, pausing just before he reached it. My mother used to say that courage was not the absence of fear. It was choosing to move forward despite the fear. He smiled slightly. I think she would have liked you. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with a folder full of possibilities and a bowl of cooling soup. The folder sat on my kitchen table for 3 days. I circled it like prey, picking it up, putting it down, convincing myself to open it, then losing my nerve. The contents felt radioactive. Once I saw what was inside, there would be no unknowing it. On the 4th day, I stopped being a coward. The offer was staggering: a position as Director of Guest Experience for the Lim Group's Hospitality Division, a newly created role that would put me in charge of standards across 23 properties in 6 countries. Salary that made my eyes water. An apartment in Gangnam, fully furnished, rent-free, a car and driver. An expense account that could have funded my grandmother's bed and breakfast for a decade. But it was the final page that stopped me cold. Confidentiality agreement regarding Lim Group business practices. The document was dense with legal language, but the meaning was clear. If I accepted this position, I would be bound by silence about anything I saw or heard. I could not discuss Lim Group operations with anyone outside the organization. I could not testify against any Lim Group member without explicit permission. I was being asked to close my eyes. My phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Taylor. The voice was unfamiliar, older, smoother, with an accent I couldn't quite place. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Who is this? A friend. Or at least, someone who could be a friend if you make the right choice. A pause. My name is Lee Dong-seok. I understand you've recently received an offer from Lim Jin-seok. My blood went cold. How do you know about that? I know many things, Miss Taylor. It is my business to know. The words were an exact echo of what Jin-seok had said in the hotel, and I knew instantly that was intentional. I also know that you are a woman of integrity, a woman who values honesty, a woman who might have reservations about the world you're being asked to enter. What do you want? Only to offer an alternative. Jin-seok is not the only powerful man in Seoul, Miss Taylor, and he is certainly not the most honest. Before you accept his offer, perhaps you should hear what he hasn't told you. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, my heart pounding. Then I grabbed Jin Seok's card and dialed. And he answered immediately. Sophie, have you made a decision? Someone just called me, Lee Dong-seok. He knew about your offer. He said, where are you? The warmth was gone from his voice, replaced by something cold and urgent. Are you at home? Yes, but... Stay there. Lock your doors. I'm sending someone now. Jin-seok, what's happening? Who is this man? A pause. When he spoke again, his voice was tired. He's my enemy, Sophie. The most dangerous one I have. And now, because of me, he knows your name. 20 minutes later, my apartment was no longer mine. Men in dark suits had appeared, transforming my tiny space into something resembling a command center. One swept the rooms with equipment I didn't recognize. Another stood by the window watching the street below. A third positioned himself by my door, his posture suggesting he would stay there indefinitely. Jin-seok arrived last, his presence filling the small apartment in ways that went beyond physical space. He dismissed the men with a gesture, and suddenly we were alone, or as alone as we could be with guards outside every exit. Lee Dong-seok, he said, sitting across from me at my kitchen table, the folder of his offer still spread between us. We grew up together. Our fathers were partners in the early days, when the Lim Group was just beginning. For a time, I thought of him as a brother. What happened? Ambition happened. Betrayal. Jin-seok's jaw tightened. When my father retired, the business should have passed to me alone, but Dong-seok believed he deserved a share. He claimed our fathers had made promises, verbal agreements that my father conveniently couldn't remember. When I refused to honor claims I couldn't verify, he reacted badly. How badly? There was an incident. People were hurt. After that, Dong-seok was pushed out of the legitimate businesses entirely. He built his own empire instead, one that operates in the spaces between laws, in the shadows where even I hesitate to reach. Jin-seok met my eyes. He hates me, Sophie, and now he knows about you. Because of your offer? Because I saved you publicly. Because I showed my hand. He rubbed his temples. I should have been more careful. I should have protected you better. Why does he care about me at all? I'm nobody. You're not nobody. Not anymore. Jin-seok leaned forward. You're someone I showed interest in. Someone I went out of my way to protect. To a man like Dong-seok, that makes you valuable. Not for who you are, but for what you represent. What do I represent? Weakness. The word fell like a stone. He thinks you're my weakness. Something he can use against me. I thought about the phone call. The smooth voice, the veiled threats, the implications. What does he want? I don't know yet, but I will find out. Jin-seok stood, moving to my window, looking out at the city that suddenly felt less safe than it had this morning. In the meantime, you cannot stay here. It's not secure. Then where? Somewhere safe. Somewhere Dong-seok cannot reach you. He turned to face me. Sophie, I understand if you want to walk away from all of this. The offer, the job, everything. I would not blame you. I thought about my options. I could take his help, disappear into a new life somewhere far from Seoul. I could go back to America, find another hotel, and start over from nothing. Or I could stand my ground. You said you needed someone with courage, I said slowly. Someone who would tell you the truth. Someone who could bring light to the shadows. I did. Then let me do that. I stood, facing him. I won't run from a man I've never met. I won't let fear make my decisions. You offered me a choice, Jin-seok. I'm making it. You're accepting the position? I'm accepting the partnership. I held out my hand. All of it. The opportunity, the risk, the shadows. But I need you to promise me something in return. He took my hand, his grip warm and steady. Name it. No more secrets. No more protecting me by keeping me in the dark. If I'm going to stand beside you, I need to know what I'm standing in. For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then, slowly, he nodded. Deal. We're almost at the end, but before we go, if you're still here, you're one of us now. Subscribe, share, and let's keep these stories alive. Now, the final chapter. The following weeks passed in a blur of change. I moved into the Gangnam apartment, which was larger than any space I had ever called home. Security became a constant presence, subtle but unmissable. Shadows that followed me wherever I went. I learned to recognize the men who protected me, learn their names, learn to appreciate the weight of Jin Seok's commitment to keeping me safe. The job was everything he had promised and more. 23 properties, each with its own culture, its own challenges, its own opportunities for improvement. I traveled Tokyo, Shanghai, Singapore, Hong Kong, conducting audits, implementing new standards, building relationships with general managers who had initially been skeptical of the young American woman who had appeared from nowhere. I proved myself the same way I always had, through work, through attention, through care that couldn't be faked. Jin Seok remained present but not overwhelming. We met weekly to discuss business, dinners that stretched into conversations about life, about family, about the weight of legacy. He told me about his mother's death, cancer, when he was 19, before he had the money to save her. He told me about his father's disappointment that he had not married, had not produced heirs to continue the family line. He told me about the loneliness that came with power, the isolation of never knowing if someone wanted you or what you could give them. I told him about my grandmother, about growing up Black in a small coastal town where kindness was sometimes the only currency we had. About the hospitality industry's particular cruelties, the guests who treated me as invisible, the managers who passed me over, the constant work of proving myself worthy of space I had already earned. We understood each other in ways that went beyond words. Lee Dong-seok did not disappear. Reports came in, surveillance detected, inquiries made, pressure applied to people in my orbit. He was patient, methodical, waiting for a weakness to exploit. Jin Seok's security responded in kind, building walls around me that I sometimes chafed against, but always appreciated. 3 months in, I received a second phone call. Miss Taylor. Dong-seok's voice was exactly as I remembered, smooth, polished, dangerous. You've been busy. I didn't hang up. I didn't panic. I simply pressed the record button on my phone and kept my voice steady. What do you want? Only to talk. To offer perspective. Jin Seok is not the hero he pretends to be, Miss Taylor. He has secrets that would shock you. Crimes that would horrify you. Are you sure you want to stake your future on a man like that? Are you sure you want to threaten someone who knows exactly who you are? A pause. Then a laugh, soft and cold. Perhaps I underestimated you. Jin Seok always did have an eye for talent. The voice hardened. Enjoy your position while you have it, Miss Taylor. Nothing lasts forever. The line went dead. I immediately called Jin Seok. Within the hour, we were in his office, a corner suite in the Lim Group headquarters that overlooked all of Seoul, listening to the recording together. He's testing you, Jin Seok said when it finished. Probing for weaknesses, trying to make you doubt. It's not working. I know. He smiled slightly. That's what scares him. He stood, moving to the window the way he always did when he was thinking. Sophie, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you before. What? Dong-seok and I. Our conflict is not just about business. It's personal. He paused. Years ago, before I knew who he truly was, I trusted him with something precious. Someone precious. A woman I cared about. My heart tightened. What happened? She disappeared. I searched for years, but she was gone. Dong-seok denies involvement, but I know that he was responsible. It was his first move against me. The one that started this war. I'm sorry. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand what kind of man he is. He doesn't just destroy enemies, Sophie. He destroys everything they love first. He makes them watch. Jin Seok turned to face me. If there ever comes a time when staying by my side puts you in danger, I need you to leave. No arguments, no heroics. Just leave. Jin Seok, promise me. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that I had already made my choice, that I wasn't going anywhere. But the look in his eyes, the fear beneath the control, stopped me. I promise, I said quietly. But you need to promise me something too. Anything. Don't push me away to protect me. Don't make decisions about my safety without my input. If we're partners, then we face things together. He was silent for a long moment, and then he nodded. Together, he agreed. The real test came 6 weeks later. I was conducting an inspection at a new hotel acquisition in Busan, coincidentally, the same city where Jin Seok's mother had grown up. The scholarship program we had created had already sent its first 10 recipients on their journeys, and I had arranged to meet one of them, a young woman named Kim Soo-min, who had never left Busan before this year. We sat in a cafe overlooking the harbor, the same docks where Jin Seok's mother had once worked, and Soo-min told me about her travels. Paris, where she had seen the Eiffel Tower and cried. Rome, where she had thrown a coin in the Trevi fountain and wished for her mother's health. Tokyo, where she had eaten sushi for the first time and decided she wanted to become a chef. Thank you, she said, her eyes bright with tears. Thank you for changing my life. It wasn't me, I said. It was someone who wanted to honor his mother's memory. Then thank him for me. Tell him that his mother's spirit lives on in every journey we take. I promised I would. It was walking back to my hotel that everything went wrong. One moment I was on a crowded street surrounded by tourists and locals. The next, a black van pulled up beside me, doors sliding open. I didn't have time to scream before hands grabbed me and pulled me inside. The room was small, windowless, lit by a single bulb that swung slightly whenever the building vibrated from traffic outside. I had been bound to a chair, my wrists zip-tied behind me, a blindfold removed just moments before. Lee Dong-seok sat across from me, his legs crossed, his expression almost bored. Miss Taylor, he said. We meet at last. I tested my bonds. They were secure. Jin Seok will kill you for this. Perhaps. Perhaps not. Dong-seok smiled. The question is whether he'll arrive in time to make it matter. He stood, circling my chair like a predator considering its prey. I've been watching you, Sophie, for months now. You've done impressive work, transformed his hotels, earned the loyalty of his staff, made yourself indispensable. Is that supposed to be a compliment? It's supposed to be a warning. He stopped in front of me, bending down so we were eye to eye. Jin Seok destroys everything he touches, Miss Taylor. His mother died heartbroken because he couldn't save her. His father disowned him because he chose business over family. The woman he loved? He smiled. Well, you know what happened to her. He told me. Did he tell you that he's the reason she's dead? That his arrogance, his refusal to compromise, is what got her killed? Dong-seok's voice hardened. I didn't take her, Miss Taylor. I simply failed to protect her when he made her a target. There's a difference. I said nothing. My mind raced, calculating options, measuring distances. Here's what's going to happen, Dong-seok continued. You're going to call Jin Seok. You're going to tell him where you are. And when he comes to rescue you, which he will, because that's who he is, I'm going to finally have the conversation I've been waiting 15 years to have. You're using me as bait. Brilliantly observed. He produced a phone and held it in front of me. The number is already dialed. All you have to do is say the words. I looked at the phone, then at Dong-seok, then at the door behind him, where I could just barely make out the shadows of guards. No. Dong-seok's expression flickered. I'm sorry? I said no. I kept my voice steady despite my pounding heart. I'm not going to be the weakness you think I am. I'm not going to call Jin Seok into a trap. You can threaten me all you want. You can hurt me, kill me. But I won't be the reason he dies. Dong Seok stared at me for a long moment. Then he laughed. Remarkable. He really did find someone special. He set the phone down and stepped back. Unfortunately for you, your compliance isn't actually required. Jin Seok's security team already knows you're missing. They're tracking your phone, which I made sure to keep on. He's on his way right now. My blood went cold. Then why ask me to call? Because I wanted to see what kind of woman you are. Dong Seok smiled. Now I know. You're the kind who would die for him. That makes this so much more meaningful. He walked toward the door. Make yourself comfortable, Miss Taylor. The real show is about to begin. I don't know how long I sat there in the dim light, listening to the sounds of the building around me. An hour, maybe 2. Long enough for fear to cycle through me and emerge on the other side as something colder, harder. I had made Jin Seok a promise. If staying by his side put me in danger, I would leave. But this wasn't about staying or leaving anymore. This was about surviving. I worked at my bonds methodically, twisting my wrists, testing the zip ties for any weakness. And they were tight, but not perfect. Whoever had tied them had been more concerned with speed than security. Slowly, painfully, I began to work one hand free, the plastic cutting into my skin with every movement. When the door burst open, I had just gotten my right hand loose. It wasn't Jin Seok who entered. It was Jae Sung, the head of his security team, a man I had come to know over the past months as quietly competent and utterly loyal. Behind him came 4 others, their movements coordinated, their weapons drawn. Miss Taylor, Jae Sung's voice was calm despite the chaos. We need to go. Now. He cut my remaining bonds and helped me to my feet. My legs were unsteady, but I forced them to work. Where's Jin Seok? Outside, with Dong Seok. Jae Sung's jaw tightened. He insisted on handling this personally. We moved through hallways I didn't recognize, downstairs, through a loading dock. When we emerged into the night air, I saw them. Jin Seok and Dong Seok, standing 10 meters apart in an empty warehouse lot. Both were alone, their respective security teams forming a perimeter but maintaining distance. 15 years, Dong Seok was saying as we approached. 15 years of waiting, watching, preparing, and now here we are. What do you want, Dong Seok? Jin Seok's voice was ice. You have my attention. Speak. I want what was always mine, a seat at the table, partnership in what our fathers built together. Dong Seok spread his hands. Give me the shipping division, 30% of the hospitality group, and I'll disappear from your life forever. And if I refuse, then I'll take them anyway, piece by piece, starting with everything you love. Dong Seok's eyes found me in the shadows. I'm a patient man, Jin Seok. I can wait. Jin Seok followed his gaze. When he saw me, bound marks on my wrists, fear barely controlled in my expression, something shifted in his face. You touched her. I made my point. You touched her. The temperature seemed to drop. Jin Seok stepped forward, and for the first time, I saw Dong Seok's confidence waver. We're done negotiating, Jin Seok said quietly. We're done talking. We're done playing games. He stopped just outside arm's reach. You have 48 hours to leave Korea. If I ever see your face again, if I ever hear your voice, if anyone who works for you ever comes near Sophie or anyone else in my life, I will destroy you. Not your business. Not your reputation. You. You don't have the... I have everything I need. Jin Seok's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried across the lot. I have the evidence of what you did to Soo-yeon. I have witnesses who are finally willing to talk. I have judges who owe me favors and prosecutors who owe me more. I have been building this case for 15 years, Dong Seok. Waiting for the right moment. He stepped back. This is your only warning. Take it, or face the consequences. The silence stretched between them. Then slowly Dongseok nodded. This isn't over, Jinseok. For your sake, Jinseok replied. I hope it is. Dongseok walked away. His men followed. Within moments we were alone in the lot. Just Jinseok, me, and the security team that had saved my life. Jinseok turned to me. His controlled expression cracked, revealing something raw underneath. Sophie. He crossed the distance between us in 3 strides, his hands cupping my face, his eyes searching for damage. Are you hurt? Did he? I'm fine. My voice cracked despite my efforts to control it. I'm fine. He pulled me into his arms, holding me with a desperation that surprised us both. I felt his heart pounding against my cheek, felt the tremor in his hands as they pressed against my back. I thought I lost you, he whispered. I thought I was too late. You weren't. I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. You came for me. I will always come for you. His voice was fierce. Always. Standing there in the empty lot, my wrists still bleeding and my heart still racing, and I realized that something had shifted between us. The careful distance we had maintained, the professional boundaries that kept us safe, they felt smaller now. Less important. Jinseok, I said softly. I think we need to talk. We will. He took my hand, careful of my injured wrist. But first, let me take you home. Home. The word had never meant much to me before, but with his hand in mine and his security team forming a protective circle around us, I realized that home wasn't a place anymore. It was wherever he was. The car ride back to Seoul was quiet but not uncomfortable. Jin-seok held my hand the entire way, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The aftermath would come soon enough. Police reports, medical attention, security reviews. The machinery of crisis response that would consume the next several days. But for now, in the back of the car with the city lights streaming past, there was only this. 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds, who had been tested and emerged stronger. When we reached the Gangnam apartment, Jin-seok walked me to my door. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow we can... Stay. The word surprised us both. Sophie. I don't want to be alone tonight, and I don't think you do either. I opened my door, then turned to face him. No pressure, no expectations, just stay. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. We sat together on my couch until dawn, not talking, just existing in the same space. At some point, I fell asleep with my head on his shoulder. When I woke, he was still there, watching the sun rise through my window. Jin-seok? My voice was rough with sleep. I'm here. I know. I sat up facing him. I meant what I said. About staying. About facing things together. I know. He turned to look at me, and there was something new in his expression. Something vulnerable. Sophie, I need you to understand something. What I feel for you, it's not something I planned. It's not something I can control. What do you feel? He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Everything, he said simply. I feel everything. I should have been scared. I should have pulled back, maintained the boundaries that kept me safe. But instead, I leaned forward. Me too. We didn't kiss. Not yet. That would come later. When the danger had passed and the wounds had healed and we were sure that what we had was real and not just adrenaline. But I knew, in that moment, that everything had changed. My life before this, the struggling, the surviving, the invisible existence, was over. Something new was beginning. Something that might be brilliant or might be dangerous, but would never, ever be invisible. I had been dragged from my office screaming. A Korean mafia boss had intervened, and my life would never be the same. 3 months later, the Seoul skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jin-seok's penthouse. I stood at the glass, watching the city pulse with life, a glass of wine in my hand. Behind me, Jin Seok was on the phone, discussing something I only half understood. Business, strategy, or the machinery of power that I was still learning to navigate. The Lim Group had continued to expand. Dong Seok had kept his word, disappeared to Tokyo, where our intelligence suggested he was rebuilding but keeping his distance. The threat remained, lurking in the shadows, but for now, it was contained. My work continued too. 23 properties had become 31, each one carrying the standards I had developed, the philosophy of service I had learned from my grandmother, and Jin Seok. He hung up the phone and came to stand beside me. "You're thinking loud again," he said, just marveling at how strange life is. I turned to face him. A year ago, I was a concierge being dragged through a lobby, accused of crimes I didn't commit. Now I'm here. Any regrets? Not a single one. He smiled. That rare, genuine smile that I had learned to treasure. Good, because I have something for you. He produced a small box from his pocket. My heart stuttered. Jin Seok, relax. It's not that. He laughed at my expression. Not yet. Though we should probably discuss that eventually. He opened the box. Inside was a key. Simple, unadorned, silver. What is this? The Busan property, the one we discussed. His eyes met mine. I want you to run it, not as an employee but as an owner. Your name on the door. Your vision. Your legacy. I stared at the key in my hands. I don't know what to say. Say yes. He took my hands in his. Say you'll build something with me. Something that honors the people who made us who we are. Something that lasts. I thought about my grandmother who had spent her life serving others with grace. About Jin Seok's mother, who had cooked with love even when there was nothing else to give. About Su Min and the other scholarship recipients, whose lives had been transformed by a simple idea. Yes, I said. Jin Seok pulled me into his arms, and I let myself relax into his embrace. The danger wasn't over. Dong Seok was still out there. The shadows still lurked. And there were challenges ahead that I couldn't even imagine. But standing there, in the arms of a man who had seen me when I was invisible and chosen to protect what he saw, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And this time, I wasn't running from anything. I was running towards something. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The game isn't over, Miss Taylor. It's only beginning. I showed it to Jin Seok. His expression hardened, but he didn't let go of me. Whatever comes next, he said, we face it together. Together, I agreed. The city glittered below us. The key was warm in my hand, and somewhere out there, an enemy was watching, waiting, planning. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Thank you for staying with Sophie's journey. From being dragged from her office to finding power, purpose, and love, this story proves that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best beginnings. If this touched you, please subscribe and share it. These voices matter. These stories deserve to be heard. And don't forget, Sophie's story is far from over. The game is just beginning. Until next time, keep breathing life into the narratives that refuse to stay silent.